Welcome to Hospitality on the Rise, the podcast about the people shaping the hospitality industry and their journeys. I'm your host, Alice Chang, founder and CEO of Culinary Agents, hospitality's go-to hiring platform. And I'm here to give you your dose of virtual mentorship. Here, we'll be sharing the stories, lessons learned, and advice from hospitality leaders who've carved out their own path to success. After all, this industry is where many get their start and go on to do incredible things. Whether you're a pro, starting out, or just love the hustle, this podcast highlights what makes hospitality extraordinary: the people. I'm so excited to have Chef Erik Battes with us today. Erik is the Executive Vice President of Food and Beverage at STARR Restaurants, which is headquarters in Philly, but across 6 or so, probably more coming soon, cities on Philly, New York, DC, and a couple of cities in Florida, including Miami and also Nashville. Erik, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and we met. I think our paths crossed a couple of different times, and I found it really fascinating, kind of your career path and how it evolved. But I'm curious, how did it all begin? How did you get into hospitality?
I've always had a connection to creative things and creative people. My parents were both artists growing up. My dad was a painter in animation back when that used to be like hand painted. Worked for Disney, Warner Brothers, grew up in LA. And my mom was a graphic artist. I sort of randomly wandered into cooking because I didn't really see a stable career path to become a drummer, which is what shaped like the first 17 years of my life. And I like shaped my entire life around. And at the time, I don't know, Food Network was kind of reaching its peak, and I thought that becoming a chef was a good balance between creativity and business, two things that I was interested in, and actually turned out to be pretty true in this business. And I guess as luck has enabled it, the career has also been something that I was well suited for, which is not always the case when you go into culinary school. And then my first job in a restaurant, I decided to work for free. It was a Wolfgang Puck Cafe in a mall in LA, where I worked for free to learn. And then I went to CIA.
Wow. Well, yeah. I mean, we oftentimes see kind of musical creativity kind of crossover into hospitality as well. That's one of the beauties of this industry as well. So you went to school in New York. So you went across country.
I did. I did. I don't know. I just looked for the best school I could find, and I don't know, it was at a time when there was less availability on the internet, but I found my way to the CIA, and it was great.
Yeah. And I love it. You mentioned, Food Network. And oftentimes we kind of look at the past, 10, 15, 20 years. And I feel like that time with Food Network kind of really changing, it kind of inspired, I would say, like a whole group of folks to see what would be possible, right? And made that really interesting. And then kicked off this whole kind of, uh, you know, world into hospitality and careers in this world. So when you were at the CIA, were you thinking, I'm gonna have my own restaurant one day, or
Um, yes, I mean, world domination was always something that was kind of inside of me for like whatever I was doing at the time. I wanted to be like at the best restaurant that I could find at the time, and I started trailing every weekend from the CIA when I was 19 years old, taking the train down as one does. Um, Trailed at Danielle with Alex Lee and La Bernardin and Chanterelle with David Waltuck and like with Marcus Samuelson was at Aquavit. And finally found my way to Jean Georges, which is where I did my externship. It was like, I don't know, my mind was blown there. It was small kitchen, main dining room, kitchen, had 7 cooks, a chef and a sous chef. And the chef there, Greg Brainin, who's remained my mentor really ever since, he said that if you come every weekend until your externship, which is what I did, you can extern here. So every weekend it was just, coming down in the city and helping the 4-star restaurant every weekend, played food, working this food station. It was awesome. And I ended up working for that group for 7 years.
yeah, well, Greg's awesome, obviously, and the team is really strong. And they've I shouldn't say like launched the careers of many, but they've definitely been the start of a lot of leaders that we've seen. And that's a great thing to also highlight is that proximity. Yes, the CIA is one of the best schools, but it's also so close to Manhattan, where there's so many great restaurants, and so clearly taking advantage of that and taking the initiative, put you in a position to kind of, get a great externship. So you are externing at Jean Georges, and how was that like? I mean, you kind of knew because you were there on the weekends and stuff, but like, do
It
you?
was I mean, these guys were honestly, looking back, and I still I'm much older now, but I still remember them. They were like gods to me, honestly. Like with the level of skill they had, they were cool. They would go out and hang out, and I don't know, it was, a little party at after work, and I just wanted everything to do with what they were doing. The skill level that they had was incredible. And actually looking back, working alongside chefs that became really successful. I mean, we were cooking with James Kent and, Greg Gourdet and, other chefs who have gone on to do incredible things. They were all on the line during that period.
Yeah. Were there anything you externed also at a couple of different places? Was there something, and you seem like a very methodical person that has frameworks and structure. Were you like comparing specific things as you were like testing out all these different kitchens, like what you liked and what you didn't like what ultimately kind of helped you decide? For those of listeners who might be at this point where they're like, where should I extern? Like, who should I go to? What should I do proactively? Any advice for them to look for?
Yeah. I have to say that my priorities don't have to be everybody's priorities. And that there's a lot of great places to learn. But, the framework that I found, I wanted to work in a restaurant that, um, had somebody at the helm that would really invest and teach, but a place that you really could learn how to cook. And there was real cooking that was happening in that kitchen. It was not like a 40-person kitchen where your job is to tweezer little, whatever in some perfect little row, and that you're peeling shallots in the basement, which they teach very good lessons. But in that position in particular, there was one, and there's actually two coveted roles, AM and PM, where you actually occupied a station where you worked amuse bouche in that for the main dining room. So you actually put out the first course, and so you had a lot of responsibility. But I think that the first kitchens that you start your career at, and this is not universally the case, but if you can start your career at the best restaurant that you can find, it has a huge impact, I believe, on who you become as a chef, because you inherit their outlook on technique and excellence and communication and systems. And if you can kind of really stick it out long enough, because the kitchens have to hire a lot of people in general, but if you can be one of the people that really embraces what a restaurant like that has to offer, you can just I think it will shape your worldview in life and in and as a professional chef.
Yeah. I love that. Great advice there. You figure out what your personal priorities are and then go find the right place that you can, meet those priorities and more. And then take that with you, to the next place and the next place. So you were there for 7 years, you said, right? 6, 7 years?
That's right.
6, 7. I don't I'm not cool enough to do that. But anyway,
I have kids, yeah. There you go.
um, and you were at Perry Street as well, right? The opening Sue there. Wow, what a great little restaurant out kind of on the outskirts, but not really. And then at what point were you like, okay, it's time to leave and expand, your personal experience into the next thing?
Yeah, so, Perry Street was a big experience for me. We Jean Georges is like the flagship restaurant, and one could say that to build a career there was, you should stay there, and that's where you should focus your attention. But opening Perry Street as a smaller restaurant, the chef at Jean Georges, Greg, left Jean Georges to open Perry Street, and he can only take a couple people with him, and I was one of them. And it was a small kitchen, like 2 cooks on the hotline, 1 on garmager. Chef worked the line and, was cooking and expediting from behind the line, old school. And, that was the perfect first sous chef job for me, and then really the first, head chef job as CDC, with essentially running the kitchen, which I did at 26. There's something to be said about, working your way up and, knowing, I don't know, everyone's always impressed by, the 22-year-old sous chef and, "Wow, you're the chef of a restaurant," and we had a Michelin star at the time. That's, impressive on paper, but, there's more learning to be had. And, at that point, I don't know. It's just opportunity presented itself, but it was came to the point where I just wanted to see some new things to continue that. So I was offered another role that was that I in retrospect was probably underqualified for, but I took a role as a corporate chef for Laurent Trondel with the BLT group when that group was sort of at its prime, and he was still a part of it. But to jump into a corporate position. I opened 9 restaurants with that group, and, you know, you have a little bit of imposter syndrome and learn along the way because you realize you have some gaps in your education that you need to fill in. But as long as you can, stay one step ahead of everyone and like you can still contribute and do good work, which, hopefully was the case when I was there.
I guess you never really know until you try, right? And I think
Yeah.
part of that is taking the leap and like having enough belief in yourself that you are prepared to a certain extent, but then also being willing to learn while you're there and recognize that there are some areas that you need to be look. Do you remember like one or two things that during that time when you were like, oh, I should I wish I knew more about this, or I should have trained more or learned these types of skills before jumping into that type of role?
I mean, Goldman. Honestly, I think that everybody should like be a little bit less impatient about climbing ladders and like really learn fundamentals of cooking. I learned a lot at Jean Georges, but like Jean Georges is like a particular style. It's very, very well developed. It's like hyper quantified in a way, and like but you learned a lot of great things there. But I don't know. I wish I could have worked in a classic restaurant and like learned French cooking. I wish I could have like learned cooking. I could wish I could have cooked in Paris, for instance. Some people management stuff. I'm sure that you learn along the way just from a leadership and management perspective, but that just kind of happens with time, anyway.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's great. We hear that often, actually. People that give advice to themselves is like slow down a little bit, like cook
Mhm.
more, cook different styles, get different experience before you take the leap. Sometimes it is a timing thing. You get an opportunity, but if you're not ready for it and you take it too soon, that could potentially work against you. I mean, in this case, it did not. But
Yeah.
then I would also say, once you get there, like ask for help, right? And I'm sure you had other people around you that you could reach out to for some advice. I'm sure Greg was there ready to help.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, certainly from a food perspective, you can always find someone who knows more than you. And I've stopped a long time ago trying to pretend like I can know and do everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I see here that that experience did also take you into working across the country, partnerships, hotels, et cetera. So definitely, you know, um, uh, you know, opened probably some other um, avenues of learning and experience while you were doing that. Did you go back to Jean Georges after that?
Yeah, I did. I had the opportunity to go back as chef de cuisine to the flagship, which was a dream. You know that I definitely couldn't pass up. To be able to operate a restaurant like that at that level, to feel the pressure of operating a kitchen with those types of standards with a small team, and it's like it really, really teaches you. It like burns into your brain forever what excellence really looks like, and definitely wouldn't trade that for anything. But I was
Yeah.
back with JG for about a year before I ended up joining Star.
Yeah. So what I take from that also is never burn your bridges. Um, I joke, but not. I think it's also employers also recognize that if you do leave on good terms and you go do some other great things, you are more valuable to them. So that you're acquiring other skills and experiences that then you can bring back to them later on as well. So, kudos for that for on all fronts. So now you're part of Star. I see you're executive chef at Morimoto.
That's right, yeah. This was my, like, favorite chef job ever, really. Morimoto's was a great restaurant. It was coming straight off of working at Jean Georges. The restaurant was busy, it made money, the product was incredible, like, got to really dive into Japanese ingredients and the food. I mean, it's easy to obsess over Japanese food as a chef, and, the restaurant sold enough tuna pizzas and rock shrimp tempuras so that I can play in the corner with like, kind of, cook, do like, I cooked more there and I created more there than I ever had in my life. You work for Jean George, you work within a bit of a framework. There is opportunity to create there, but like not like there was for me at Morimoto. So that was a great time. I had a great team there, and then segued that into another corporate role. It keeps pulling me into these these styles of positions, but then I became a corporate chef after that.
Yeah, and I'm gonna hold on to that for a minute. What would you say for those who aspire to be a corporate chef? What would you say was the biggest what's the biggest difference between being an executive chef of a restaurant and then being a corporate chef?
I have a lot of opinions on this, and I think it depends on the group that you're with and the size of the company to some degree. If you're with a smaller group, and this kind of comes down to like the idea of generalist versus specialist or depth versus breadth, you know? Well, if you're with a smaller group and that has one corporate chef, you kind of need to be a generalist. You are involved with operations, you are doing menu development, maybe you're like, covering for on the schedule sometimes, you're providing some leadership and firefighting a lot. But in larger groups, it ends up enabling a little bit more specialization. So you could have people who are really focused on operations, who are like essentially, I mean, Star, we have corporate chefs who are like almost like project managers, right? They are managing new restaurant openings and designing kitchens and hiring teams and like really like quarterbacking entire projects. We have others that are, more firefighters that are great generalists that could go in and fix a problem when the omelet is off at this restaurant, or we need a new spring garnish for this duck dish over here. And then we have like specialists. I don't know. I kind of, personally refer to them as like super chefs in a way. People who have like the level of cooking pedigree that like is like the 1% of the 1%. And, their skill set is like really, primarily, not primarily, but it's like best suited. The highest and best use of some of these people, these types of folks, is to help develop the menus and the cooking that happens within the restaurants. For me, I have experienced kind of like a lot of that. When I joined Star as a corporate chef, there were just two corporate chefs and a lot of ground to cover, and I ended up having to do a lot and wear a lot of different hats. As we've continued to grow, and I've returned to Star after another break, which we can talk about later. But
Oh yeah, we're getting into that.
yeah, that's you can kind of have different types of folks do different types of things.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, arguably, when you joined Star as a corporate chef the first time, they were a lot smaller, right?
Yeah,
Because they're in a different stage of growth now. But let's hone in on that in between, because I love the fact that you then took all of your skills and experience, et cetera, and then took it in a totally different direction. So you went to work with Good Uncle. You were the chief operating officer at Good Uncle for a while with
yeah,
Wiley.
yes, yeah.
I
Yeah,
didn't know that, actually. I just
yeah.
realized that.
So this was like a seminal moment for me, and I think that like if you look at a career path for going from a cook to somebody who's doing what I do, without this experience, it just simply could not have existed. Just based on what I learned during this time period. So, after 17 years in the industry and like opening a lot of restaurants between a couple different restaurant groups, and I had kind of reached a point where I was a corporate chef kind of early in my career. I think it's a great role for someone, and I think that you can certainly like enter at roles like that at certain times. But like I've always had like an entrepreneurial spirit, like truly, like I think that's to the act of creation and the energy behind like creating something new has always been something interesting. So I had the opportunity to join an early stage venture capital backed startup right at their first round of institutional funding, called Good Uncle, which was a college meals business. I found a very different type of mentor there. What you mentioned, Wiley Sorelli. This is like
Yeah.
he's like one of these like near like mythical levels of like high
Yes.
frequency people, like Steve Jobs type, like off the charts charisma, super strategic thinker, most skilled salesperson I've ever met. He had $100 million exit right before this. So to be able to be exposed to this type of business, which started as one thing and it ended as another. But like I was exposed to like things like, working with instead of restaurant people who are awesome. And I, have do nothing but great things to say about people in our business, but to be able to work with like software engineers and product people and like incredible marketers and like Wharton MBAs and like just like you talk about mind blowing and like expanding of your like worldview. Um, I got to like for that chapter really invent and navigate a food business through like a couple of business model pivots and into an eventual acquisition to Airmark in 2019, which was an incredible experience.
Yeah, yes. I mean, many never get that, a piece of that experience, let alone the beginning to end, right? Which is like super unique. And when those types of opportunities, come about, absolutely the fact that you did what you did up to that time and you had that type of experience kind of prepared you to quite frankly, get hired for that position, right? Because oftentimes people say like, well, that sounds so cool. I want to do that. But yeah, how do you prepare yourself to be able to step into a role like that, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, again, I don't know. Certain people are like really excellent. But like a lot of the world is structured based on like maps and like you follow the map. And like there's certain people, I believe myself included, that are really drawn to situations where there's no map and then you need to create it. So it was just a perfect fit. And like honestly, a lot of like the thrill of like opening restaurants and like just like doing kind of these new things on like the tip of like what a company is doing is just like 10x magnified in a startup
Yeah.
environment. You know,
Yeah.
I did it twice. So like even after Good Uncle, I was a part of another startup that had a different and opposite outcome, which was another incredible experience also.
Yeah, so take me to that one. So,
Yeah.
you did that, you went through the acquisition, you're at Aramark, and then you're like, "Oh, I'm gonna go do the
Yeah,
entrepreneurship
yeah. So I
again."
was advising for a venture fund called Army Squared Ventures. Somebody that I've actually become friends with, but like back when venture capital was still investing in food and not just like B2B software and AI, I would have to like advise on like a potential investment during the pandemic, which was a direct to consumer meals business that was exploding with growth at the time, like triple digits month over month. And it, made sense for me to join the business as president at the time, and grew that business from a small commissary kitchen model to like a 84,000 square foot like manufacturing facility. We were shipping 110,000 meals a week like nationally. And like really what like the training wheels were off with that one. We raised, $30 million and had a really good run. But we weren't operating profitably as like many businesses like this do not. Just with the intention of growth. But as interest rates started to rise and like post pandemic, it just became apparent that we couldn't continue to fundraise. So we tried to attempted to sell the business with an investment bank, which didn't end up materializing. But really dramatic story. In the end, like our senior secured lender of some debt that we had ended up sweeping our bank account and rendering our business insolvent. We just had to shut down. So that was an insane experience to have gone through. But like the lessons that I learned from that about business, about corporate finance, about people and managing emotions through times
Yeah.
like this, you could never have learned that through like business school.
Yeah, yeah. I'm like getting chills because, obviously Culinary Agents is a venture-backed startup as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, I'm like, I just saw, like, my past 14 years of my life flash before my eyes. Anyway, um, but what incredible, right? To get that type and that level, of experience, so I mean, with a very short amount of time, that's a very intense, very intense. I don't know if, like, I'm saying it, but I'm like, I'm feeling it as well. It's like I can't even describe it as how intense that must have been for you.
Yeah.
But amazing experience, right? So after all of this, you're like, oh, you went to do other things as well. Well, you did a lot of stuff. And then I see you're doing advising for Naya. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, yeah. So I'll be honest. When we wound down that business or whatever, hit a brick wall with that business. I was at a bit of a crossroads. I had imagined possibly never coming back to the restaurant business. I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna stay in startups. This is like for me, and I'm gonna just, raise money and do it again, and I wanna be an entrepreneur." It came face to face with the realization of, like, how much my, like, identity was, like, tied to myself professionally, in between period where it was like, "All right, I know a lot, but it's in a sector that is, like, going through a nuclear winter and may never come back." I did some like soul searching and consulting and, just to kind of pick up some projects, that like filled in some time. But like really, I made the choice to come back to the restaurant industry and called Steven, Steven Starr, and really made the choice that if I'm going to come back, there's no restaurant group that I'd rather work for than STARR Restaurants. So made sense for me to come back after a couple months of conversations. But that's I wanted to make sure that I came back with a certain type of role, with a certain type of company that like I could continue at least with the spirit of the entrepreneurial energy that I had, which honestly STARR is the perfect place for.
Yeah, yeah, and, yes, restaurants in general, I was gonna make the comment earlier, but I was just, listening to, every word that you're saying, is that there's a lot of parallels with, like, a regular entrepreneurship journey with, like, opening a restaurant and, going through those learnings and struggles for, first-time founders, if you will, and, startups in the context of, like, venture-backed startups and fundraising, what people kinda think startups, but there's so much of that of the similar challenges and, like life cycles of the business, et cetera, emotional roller coaster, all those things, I think you can draw from both sides. So, it's not that far fetched that you would join a group like STARR because, like I mentioned earlier, the growth, in the past, couple of years and then what's planned is just been like one after another. I don't even know. I can barely keep up with you guys, but congrats because that's, you know, first of all, I hope you took a beat after all that because I feel like going through all that is also, for
I
for for the
I didn't
leader.
myself enjoy one single moment of it, Alice, to be honest. I don't know, when you have a family and you are faced with like, all right, paycheck stopped and you need to find something, when you reach a certain level, it takes time to find something, the right thing. And, I learned a lot through that period of like treating a job search if you don't have a job as a job. So really I would just punch in every day and just kind of start networking, working through, whatever that process looked like. So no, I got no beats, although, emotionally, I was not showing up to it.
Yeah, and, I'm sure you have actually, I was gonna say, what keeps you inspired? How do you refill your cup? I hope you've been able to find little beats in between to kind of, uh, take a step back and enjoy, but I wanna latch on to what you just said about, when you reach a certain point, or any points in your career where you have a logical, like, take a moment and self-assess or reassess, like, your priorities, what you wanna do, your skills, etcetera, is to treat, finding a job or mapping out the next step of your career as a job, right? And now more than ever, there's more tools, information, whatever. If you ask yourself the hard questions and you realize that this type of path is what you want, work it back. What are the skills you need? Who's successful there? Who do you admire? How do you acquire those skills? What businesses should you work for in order to get closer to those other people? I mean, it really, to your mapping conversation, like it really is like an exercise.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of cool frameworks I kind of came across through that process. A self-assessment or like a 360 assessment of like what jobs could I get easily today if I applied? What jobs would be like a stretch? And then what jobs can you like probably not get, you know? And like to kind of map out that landscape and just realize the power of network and just like, having conversations with people just to stay top of mind and like not necessarily having an ask for them. I was guessing CEOs' email addresses and cold emailing them and like all of the things, So it was cool. I mean, it's an interesting thing to unpack and like fun. It's like dating, maybe. I don't know. Like I've been with my wife since we were in high school, so I'm not one to speak to that. But it's like there is some like excitement in playing that game as well.
Yeah, yeah. And lean on the people that you can ask for help with. I genuinely believe that people want to help. And sometimes the help is just like talking through something. I mean, and also asking them to connect you to somebody else that might be good for you to talk to, right? That's how we initially got connected through people that we knew that was like, hey, talk to this person.
Yeah, and the, like, kind of lightweight consulting leading to a full-time role thing is, like, a good path too for people.
Yeah, yeah. Well, congrats. I always say that this industry is like, the center of gravity, like, kind of draws you back in.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And I guess I can arguably say that that's also like Steven and STARR Restaurants, right? Steven has his own gravitational pull in and of itself. Um,
Yeah, like the sun and the solar system.
right. On that note, we're gonna go to quickfire. What advice would you tell your younger self?
I'm gonna skip the stay cooking longer one, but I don't know. I think that, balance is a choice, and that at certain times, I think I could have possibly made a choice to, like, have a little bit more of it. Um, just making sure that if you choose to have relationships and, like, a family and things like that, that you have to be able to support that with, like, sufficient attention and time as well.
What's your advice for someone struggling in the industry?
Going back to the identity thing, like, I think that the number one thing is that, like, you need to realize that you are not your job, and that, like, the it and honestly, the industry rewards the opposite most of the time. Like, people who care the most and do the most are often the ones who are celebrated, but you should be careful to not tie your identity too close to your work for fear of collapse at a certain point, but, like, creating separation actually, I think, makes you better at your job.
What's your advice for fellow hospitality leaders?
I'll do a call to action, okay, because this is a career podcast. I think that we are going to have to build the next generation of leaders and creatives if we're going to keep this industry alive and uncommoditized and special. That I'm sure everyone is seeing that, like, true, real talent is scarce. And that, like, if if for chefs in particular, if you've been around long enough, you've seen the transition from, like, the classic technique and cooking with your senses to the kind of where we're at with all the hyper quantification. And I think that all of this is where we're at is a direct result of a scarcity of talent for some degree, or, like, some imbalance of supply and demand. And that, like, buying talent has its limitations. And I think that, like, we need to go back to teaching certain things and, like, move away from the dilution and, like, inspire cooks to want to be great cooks. And we as stewards of this industry, I think we need to create an industry that's worthy of attracting, like, high aptitude and high performing people to enter it.
I love the call to action. Eric, on that note, thank you so much for spending time with us and sharing your really interesting and long career. Although you are very young, you've done a lot. And can't wait to see what's next.
Great. Well, excited to have done this. Thank you, Alice.
Remember, success looks different for everyone in hospitality. No two paths are the same. If you have a leader or a topic you want to hear about, email media@culinaryaagents.com. Hospitality on the Rise is brought to you by Culinary Agents, connecting top talent with employers since 2012. Whether you're hiring or looking for your next opportunity, join us at culinaryaagents.com. For more inspiration, subscribe to Hospitality on the Rise and visit hospitalitycareerpaths.com, a free platform by Culinary Agents. Thanks for tuning in. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe. And if you love this episode, share it with someone who could use a little inspiration.